The cold that January night in 1884 could strip the flesh from bone, and Hannah Owens felt every degree of it as she stumbled through the outskirts of San Angelo, Texas, wondering how her life had crumbled to this frozen moment. Her father was dead 3 weeks now, buried in ground so hard they had to use pickaxes, and the bank had wasted no time claiming their ranch, turning her out with nothing but the clothes on her back and a canvas bag holding her mother's wedding ring and a tintype of better days. The tears came without permission, hot against her wind-burned face for just a second before the brutal cold turned them to ice on her cheeks, tiny crystals that caught what little moonlight filtered through the heavy clouds overhead. She had walked for miles after the stagecoach driver told her he could not extend credit for her fare to Fort Worth where her aunt lived. And now she could not feel her feet anymore, could not feel much of anything except the desperate knowledge that she needed shelter, or she would die out here in the scrub brush and scattered mesquite trees. The wind howled across the flat Texas landscape like something alive and angry, cutting through her wool coat as though it were made of paper. Hannah was 20 years old and had never known such cold, had never imagined that Texas could turn this vicious. But a rare winter storm had swept down from the north and transformed everything familiar into something deadly and strange. The lights of town were behind her now, too far to reach, and she had foolishly thought she could make it to the old Henderson place a few miles out, remembered that it had a barn that might offer some protection. But the cold was winning, sapping her strength with every step, and she sank to her knees in the hard, packed dirt, her breath coming in ragged gasps that turned to white vapor and vanished. This was how it ended then, she thought with a strange, detached calm. Not in some grand tragedy, but alone in the dark, freezing to death because she had nowhere else to go. The sound of hoofbeats cut through her fading consciousness, and she tried to lift her head but could not manage it. The horse stopped nearby, and she heard boots hitting the ground, heard a man's voice saying something she could not quite make out through the ringing in her ears. Then strong hands were lifting her, and she felt herself being pulled against a chest that radiated warmth like a furnace. She tried to speak to ask who he was, but her jaw would not work properly. "I have got you," the voice said, close to her ear now, deep and reassuring. "You are going to be all right, just hold on." She felt herself being lifted onto a horse, felt the man mount behind her and wrap an arm around her waist to keep her steady. His other arm pulled his heavy coat around both of them, cocooning her in warmth, and she leaned back against him without thinking, desperate for any relief from the cold. The horse began to move, and she drifted in and out of awareness as they rode, conscious only of the steady rhythm of the animal's gait and the solid presence of the man holding her. When next she came fully to herself, they were in a cabin, small but well built, with a fire roaring in a stone fireplace that took up most of one wall. She was sitting in a chair close to the flames, wrapped in blankets, and the man was kneeling in front of her, carefully removing her frozen boots. He was perhaps 25, with dark hair that curled slightly at the collar and eyes the color of whiskey in lamplight. His face was all hard planes and angles, weathered by sun and wind, with a few days' worth of dark stubble on his jaw. "Can you feel your feet?" he asked, his hands gentle as he examined them for frostbite. Hannah tried to answer, but her teeth were chattering too hard. He nodded as though she had spoken and rose to pour something from a pot on the stove. He came back with a tin cup of hot broth and held it to her lips. "Slow sips," he instructed. "Not too fast." The broth burned going down, but it was the best thing she had ever tasted, warming her from the inside. After a few sips, she managed to get her shaking under control enough to speak. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice hoarse. "You saved my life." "What were you doing out there?" he asked, settling back on his heels. "That cold will kill you quick." "I know," she said, and felt fresh tears welling up, though these stayed liquid in the warmth of the cabin. "I had nowhere else to go." He studied her for a long moment, those amber eyes taking in everything, and she wondered what he saw. A woman at the end of her rope, probably, someone who had lost everything, because that was exactly what she was. "Name is Austin McCabe," he said finally. "This is my place. You are welcome to stay until the storm passes." "Hannah Owens," she managed. "I am sorry to be a burden." "No burden," he said simply. "Could not very well leave you out there to freeze." He rose and went to tend the fire, adding another log, and Hannah watched him move around the small space with the easy confidence of a man comfortable in his own skin. The cabin was sparse but clean, with a bed in one corner, a table with 2 chairs, shelves holding supplies, and not much else. A saddle and tack hung on the wall near the door, and she could see a rifle mounted above the window. "You are a cowboy," she said, more statement than question. "Ranch hand," he corrected, glancing back at her. "Work for the Matson spread about 10 miles north of here. This is one of their line shacks where I stay during winter to watch over the cattle in this section." "So you live out here alone?" "Most times," he said. "Suits me well enough." Hannah took another sip of broth, feeling the warmth spreading through her limbs, bringing with it the painful prickling sensation of blood returning to cold extremities. She bit her lip against the discomfort, and Austin must have noticed because he came back over with a sympathetic expression. "I know it hurts," he said, "but that is good, means you are warming up proper." "How did you find me?" she asked. "Went into town earlier for supplies. Was heading back when I saw something dark against the snow. Thought maybe it was a calf got separated from its mama, but then I got close enough to see it was a person." He shook his head. "Few more minutes and I would have missed you entirely in the dark." "Providence," Hannah murmured. "Call it what you like," Austin said. "I call it lucky." As the night wore on, Austin made her eat some beans and bacon, refused to let her apologize for taking his food, and insisted she take the bed while he made himself comfortable on the floor near the fire with a bedroll. Hannah protested, but he would not hear of it, and she was too exhausted to argue much. She lay in the narrow bed, still wrapped in blankets, listening to the wind howl outside and the fire crackle, and tried not to think about how close she had come to dying out there in the cold. She must have slept because when she opened her eyes again, pale winter light was filtering through the window, and Austin was at the stove, cooking something that smelled wonderful. She sat up slowly, relieved to find that her body was responding normally again, no lasting damage from her ordeal. "Morning," Austin said without turning around. "How are you feeling?" "Better," Hannah said honestly. "Sore and tired, but better." "Good." He turned with a plate of eggs and more bacon, brought it to her. "Eat up. You need your strength." She took the plate, suddenly ravenous, and ate while Austin had his own breakfast at the table. Through the window, she could see that snow had fallen during the night, covering everything in a blanket of white. It was beautiful and terrifying in equal measure. "Storm is supposed to last another day or two," Austin said, following her gaze. "Cannot take you anywhere until it clears." "I understand," Hannah said. "I appreciate your hospitality." "Want to tell me what had you out there last night?" he asked, his tone casual but his eyes keen. Hannah set down her fork, her appetite suddenly gone. But he had saved her life, had taken her in without question. He deserved to know the truth. "My father died 3 weeks ago," she began, and once she started talking, it all came pouring out. The debts she had not known about, the bank foreclosing, the lawyer who had leered at her and suggested she could work off what was owed in ways that made her skin crawl. Her aunt in Fort Worth, who she had only met once but who had written after her father's funeral to say Hannah was welcome. the stage-coach fare she could not afford, her decision to try walking to the next town to see if she could find work there, how the cold had caught her unaware. Austin listened without interrupting, his expression growing darker as she spoke, particularly when she mentioned the lawyer. When she finished, he was quiet for a long moment, turning his coffee cup in his hands. "This lawyer have a name?" he asked finally. "It does not matter now," Hannah said tiredly. "What is done is done." "That is not how I see it," Austin said, his voice hard. "Man like that should not get away with treating a woman so poorly." "There are a lot of things in this world that should not be, but are," Hannah said. "I learned that when my mother died 5 years ago. Learned it again when they put my father in the ground, learning it still." Austin's expression softened. "I am sorry for your losses, truly. Thank you." Hannah looked down at her hands, at the calluses from years of ranch work now useless. "I do not know what I am going to do. I have no money, no family except an aunt I barely know, no prospects." "You have time to figure it out," Austin said. "At least until the storm passes." The day unfolded slowly, the small cabin becoming a world unto itself while the storm raged outside. Austin went out twice to check on the horses and bring in more wood, returning each time crusted with snow and half frozen despite his heavy coat. Hannah made herself useful by tidying the cabin, mending a tear in one of his shirts that she found in a basket, preparing their midday meal. It felt strange to be doing such domestic tasks in a stranger's home, but also oddly comfortable, as though this were the most natural thing in the world. They talked as they worked, careful conversations at first, testing the waters of who they were to each other. Austin told her about growing up in Missouri, coming to Texas 5 years ago after his parents died in a fire. He had worked various ranches, learning the trade, until he found a place with the Matson outfit that suited him. "The old man, Cyrus Matson, he is fair," Austin explained as they sat by the fire that evening. "Pays decent, does not work you to death, and trusts his men to do their jobs. That is all I need." "You want your own place someday?" Hannah asked. Austin was quiet for a moment, staring into the flames. "Maybe. Hard to say. Ranching is a tough business, especially starting from nothing. Would take years to save enough for land and cattle, and even then, there are no guarantees. Drought, disease, falling prices, any number of things can wipe you out." "My father loved it though," Hannah said softly. "Even when times were hard, even when the work was backbreaking, he loved being out there with the cattle, loved the land. He used to say that a man who owned his own piece of earth was truly free." "He was not wrong," Austin said, "but freedom comes at a cost." "Everything does," Hannah agreed. The second day brought more snow and wind that rattled the shutters, but inside the cabin, a different kind of warmth was building. Hannah found herself watching Austin when he was not looking, noticing the way his hands moved with precision and economy, the quiet competence with which he handled every task. He was not a man given to wasted motion or empty words, and there was something deeply appealing about that, after years of her father's friends who talked big but delivered little. For his part, Austin seemed equally aware of her, his eyes following her movements around the cabin, a small smile touching his lips when she hummed while cooking, approval in his gaze when she proved capable and practical rather than helpless. On the evening of the second day, as they sat by the fire after supper, Austin reached out and gently touched her cheek where the tears had frozen 2 nights before. "You had ice crystals right here," he said quietly. "Like diamonds." Hannah felt her breath catch at the contact, at the tenderness in his touch. "I thought I was going to die," she admitted. "I truly did, but you did not," Austin said, his hand still cupping her cheek. "You are here and you are safe." "Because of you," Hannah whispered. Because you were strong enough to keep going until I found you, Austin corrected. Do not sell yourself short, Hannah Owens. The way he said her name, low and warm, made something flutter in her chest. She had known this man for barely 2 days, and yet she felt more seen, more valued than she had in months. Maybe years. Austin, she began, not sure what she was going to say, but he leaned in and kissed her, soft and questioning, giving her every opportunity to pull away. She did not pull away. Instead, she kissed him back, her hand coming up to rest against his chest where she could feel his heart beating strong and steady. The kiss deepened, and when they finally broke apart, they were both breathing hard. I should not have done that, Austin said, though he did not sound particularly sorry. Why not? Hannah asked. Because you are vulnerable and I do not want to take advantage. You are not, Hannah assured him. I kissed you back, I wanted to. Even so, Austin said, pulling back slightly. You have been through a lot. I do not want you to do something you will regret. I will not regret it, Hannah said with more certainty than she felt about much else in her life. I promise you that. But Austin, for all his obvious attraction, remained the gentleman, banking the fire between them as surely as he banked the one in the hearth before they settled in for the night. Hannah lay in the bed, listening to him breathe in his bedroll on the floor, and wondered what tomorrow would bring. The storm broke on the 3rd day, the wind dying down and the snow stopping, leaving the world blanketed in white and eerily quiet. Austin went out to assess the conditions, and came back with the news that the roads should be passable by afternoon if the temperature stayed steady. I can take you into San Angelo, he offered. Maybe we can figure out how to get you to Fort Worth from there. All right, Hannah said, trying to ignore the sinking feeling in her stomach. She did not want to leave, did not want to go back to being alone and uncertain, but she could not stay here forever. Austin had his own life, his own work. She was just someone he had helped in a moment of crisis. Except when she looked at him, she did not see pity or obligation in his eyes. She saw something else, something that made her pulse quicken and her thoughts scatter. They made the ride into San Angelo in silence, Hannah sitting in front of Austin on his horse again, his arm around her waist. The town was digging out from the storm, people shoveling snow, checking on neighbors. Austin took her to the boarding house run by Mrs. Chen, a stern-faced Chinese woman who had carved out a place for herself in San Angelo through sheer force of will and an unmatched ability to keep order. She needs a room, Austin told Mrs. Chen, and I will pay for a week. Austin, no, Hannah protested. You have already done so much. A week gives you time to figure things out, Austin said firmly. To send word to your aunt, see what your options are, Mrs. Chen looked between them, her sharp eyes missing nothing, then nodded. Room 3, top of the stairs, includes breakfast and supper. Austin paid, then turned to Hannah. I need to get back to the ranch, check on the herd, but I will be back in a few days to see how you are doing. You do not have to, Hannah said, though she desperately wanted him to. I know, Austin said, but I will anyway. He tipped his hat to Mrs. Chen and left, and Hannah watched him go with an ache in her chest that had nothing to do with the cold. The week that followed was strange and lonely. Hannah sent a telegram to her aunt in Fort Worth, explaining the situation, asking for help with stagecoach fare. She waited for a response, filled her days with helping Mrs. Chen around the boarding house in exchange for her meals, tried not to think about Austin McCabe every waking moment. She failed spectacularly at that last part. True to his word, Austin came to town 3 days later, appearing at the boarding house door with his hat in his hands and a tentative smile on his face. Mrs. Chen let him in with a knowing look and made herself scarce. How are you? Austin asked. Well enough, Hannah said. I sent word to my aunt. waiting to hear back. "Good," Austin said, then seemed at a loss for what to say next. They stood in the front parlor, the space between them charged with everything unsaid. "Would you like some coffee?" Hannah offered finally. "Please." They sat in the dining room, cups of bitter coffee between them, and talked about nothing and everything. The weather, the cattle, how the ranch had fared during the storm. Small talk that danced around what they both really wanted to discuss. Finally, Austin set down his cup and looked at her directly. "I cannot stop thinking about you," he said bluntly. "Have not been able to since I found you out there in the cold." Hannah's heart jumped into her throat. "I cannot stop thinking about you either," she admitted. "I do not know what that means," Austin said, "or what to do about it." "Neither do I," Hannah said, "but I know I do not want to go to Fort Worth. I know I do not want to leave here." "There is not much here for you," Austin pointed out, "not without your father's ranch." "There is you," Hannah said quietly. Austin leaned back in his chair, running a hand through his hair. "I am a ranch hand, Hannah. I make $40 a month and live in a lined shack when I am working, a bunkhouse when I am not. I have got nothing to offer a woman." "I did not ask you to offer me anything," Hannah said. "No, but I want to," Austin said, his voice rough with emotion. "That is the problem. I want to offer you everything and I have got nothing." "That is not true," Hannah said. She reached across the table and took his hand. "You saved my life. You took care of me. You treated me with more kindness and respect than anyone has in a long time. That is not nothing, Austin." He turned his hand over, lacing his fingers with hers. "What are we doing here?" he asked. "I do not know," Hannah said honestly, "but I would like to find out." Over the next 2 weeks, as Hannah waited for word from her aunt that never came, Austin rode into town every few days. They would walk through San Angelo together, proper and respectable with Mrs. Chen's eagle eye watching, but Hannah felt the crackle of something more between them with every passing visit. Austin told her stories about his work, about the cattle and the land, about the other men on the ranch. She told him about her childhood, about her mother's death, and how her father had fallen apart bit by bit in the years since, about her dreams of having a family someday, of building something lasting. "Your aunt never wrote back?" Austin asked one afternoon as they walked along the Concho River, watching the water flow past. "No," Hannah said, trying to keep the hurt out of her voice. "I suppose she changed her mind about taking me in, or maybe the telegram never reached her. Hard to say." "So what will you do?" "I have been helping Mrs. Chen," Hannah said. "She mentioned she might be able to use someone permanent. The pay is not much, but it would be room and board plus a little extra." "Is that what you want?" Austin asked. "Working in a boarding house?" "What I want does not seem to matter much," Hannah said with a bitter laugh. "I need to survive. This is how I can do that." Austin stopped walking, turned to face her. "What if there was another way?" "What do you mean?" He took a deep breath, and Hannah could see the tension in his shoulders, the way he was working up his courage. "Marry me," he said simply. Hannah stared at him, certain she had misheard. "What? Marry me?" Austin repeated. "I know we have not known each other long, and I know I do not have much to offer, but I care about you, Hannah. More than I have cared about anyone in a long time, maybe ever. And I think you care about me too." "I do," Hannah breathed. "But Austin, we barely know each other." "I know enough," he said. "I know you are strong and capable and kind. I know you do not give up when things get hard. I know that I would rather spend my life getting to know you better than spend another day wondering what might have been." "This is crazy," Hannah said, but her heart was racing and she could feel a smile tugging at her lips. "Maybe," Austin agreed, "but sometimes crazy is all we have got." Hannah looked at this man who had appeared in her darkest moment like an answer to a prayer she had not known how to voice, who had warmed her frozen tears and promised, through his actions if not his words, that there could be smiles tomorrow. She thought about her father, about how he had always told her to seize happiness when she found it because life was too short and too hard to waste time on fear. "Yes," she said. "Yes, I will marry you." The smile that broke across Austin's face was like the sun coming out from behind clouds. He swept her up in his arms, spinning her around, and when he set her down, he kissed her right there by the river where anyone could see, and Hannah did not care one bit. They were married a week later in a simple ceremony at the small church in San Angelo, with Mrs. Chen and a few of the other boarding house residents as witnesses. The preacher, a kindly old man named Reverend Thornton, smiled benevolently throughout and declared them man and wife with genuine warmth. Hannah wore a dress that Mrs. Chen had helped her make from fabric Austin bought at the general store, pale blue with white trim, simple but pretty. Austin wore his best shirt and pants, his dark hair slicked back, looking nervous and happy in equal measure. After the ceremony, Mrs. Chen hosted a small celebration at the boarding house, producing a cake that made Hannah tear up at the unexpected kindness. The other residents, a mix of miners, ranch hands, and drifters, offered their congratulations and ribald advice that made Hannah blush and Austin laugh. That night, they stayed in the boarding house room that had been Hannah's, Austin having arranged with his boss to take a few days off. It was their wedding night, and Hannah was nervous despite the kisses they had shared, despite the way her body responded to Austin's touch. This was different, more serious, the beginning of their life together in the most intimate way possible. Austin was gentle and patient, taking his time, making sure she was comfortable, that she wanted this as much as he did. And Hannah did want it, wanted him, wanted this connection that felt like it was sealing something that had started the night he found her freezing in the dark. Afterward, they lay tangled together in the narrow bed, and Hannah felt a peace she had not known in longer than she could remember. "I love you," Austin said into the darkness, his voice rough with emotion. "I know I should have said it before we married, but I am saying it now. I love you, Hannah." "I love you too," Hannah whispered back, the words feeling both momentous and utterly right. "I did not think I would ever feel this way about anyone." "Neither did I," Austin admitted. "But here we are." "Here we are," Hannah agreed and fell asleep with her head on his chest, listening to his heartbeat. The next few days passed in a haze of happiness, stolen moments of privacy in the boarding house, walks around town as a married couple, planning for their future. Austin talked to his boss, Cyrus Matson, and came back with surprising news. "He is giving us the line shack," Austin announced, his eyes bright with excitement. "Says we can live there instead of me going back to the bunkhouse. It is not much, but it would be ours." "Truly?" Hannah asked, hardly daring to believe it. "Truly," Austin confirmed. "He also said he is getting too old to manage the ranch alone, and if I am interested, he would consider taking me on as a partner in a few years, once I have learned more about the business side of things." "Austin, that is wonderful," Hannah said, throwing her arms around him. "It is a long way off," Austin cautioned, "and a lot of hard work between now and then, but it is a chance, Hannah, a real chance at something more." "We will work hard," Hannah said firmly, "both of us, whatever it takes." They moved to the line shack the following week, their possessions fitting easily into a single wagon. Mrs. Chen bid them farewell with uncharacteristic emotion, pressing a package of food into Hannah's hands and telling Austin to take good care of her girl. The ride out to the shack took most of the day, and by the time they arrived, the sun was setting in a blaze of orange and gold across the flat Texas landscape. "Home," Austin said simply, helping Hannah down from the wagon. It was the same cabin where he had brought her that first night, where he had saved her life, and set in motion everything that followed. Hannah looked at the rough-hewn logs, the stone chimney, the simple door, and felt a swell of love for this place that had been a refuge in her darkest hour and was now the foundation for her new life. Home, she agreed. Life at the line shack fell into a rhythm quickly. Austin would rise before dawn to check the cattle, ride the fence lines, handle the countless tasks that came with managing several hundred head of cattle across miles of rough country. Hannah kept the cabin, cooked their meals, mended clothes, and began working on a small garden plot near the cabin when the weather warmed. It was hard work, physically demanding in ways that left them both exhausted at the end of each day. But it was their work, their life, and that made all the difference. In March, a late freeze threatened the new calves, and Austin was gone for 3 days straight, riding in only for quick meals and a few hours of sleep before heading back out. Hannah waited and worried, kept coffee hot on the stove, made sure he ate when he was home. When the crisis passed and the calves were safe, Austin came back to the cabin and collapsed into bed, asleep before his head hit the pillow. Hannah sat beside him, studying his face in the lamplight, the lines of exhaustion, the weathering of sun and wind that made him look older than his 25 years. She loved him so much it sometimes frightened her, this fierce protectiveness and devotion that had grown from those first tentative feelings into something solid and unshakable. When Austin woke hours later, he found her still sitting there, and he smiled sleepily. "You are supposed to be sleeping too," he mumbled. "I was watching you," Hannah said, "making sure you are all right." "I am better than all right," Austin said, pulling her down beside him. "I have got you." As spring gave way to summer, the work shifted but did not let up. Branding, moving cattle to better grazing, constant vigilance against predators and thieves. Cyrus Matson came out to check on them a few times and seemed pleased with what he found. He was a gruff man in his 60s, weathered and tough, but Hannah could see the fairness that Austin had mentioned, the respect he showed his men. "You have done well with this one," Cyrus told Austin on one visit, nodding toward Hannah. "Not many women could handle this life." "She is stronger than she looks," Austin said, pride clear in his voice. "I can see that," Cyrus agreed. Then to Hannah, "You need anything, you let me know. Austin here is like a son to me. That makes you family too." Hannah was touched by the gruff kindness, thanked him sincerely. After Cyrus left, she and Austin sat on the porch of the line shack, watching the sun set, and Hannah felt a contentment she had never expected to find. "Thank you," she said softly. "For what?" Austin asked. "For finding me that night, for taking care of me, for giving me this life." "You gave me just as much," Austin said. "More even. I was just going through the motions before you. Now I have got a reason for all of it." In August, Hannah realized she was pregnant. She told Austin one evening after supper, nervous about how he would react, but he whooped with joy and picked her up and swung her around until she was dizzy and laughing. "A baby," he kept saying, wonder in his voice. "We are going to have a baby. Are you happy?" Hannah asked, needing to hear him say it. "Happy does not even begin to cover it," Austin said. "You have made me the luckiest man in Texas, Hannah McCabe." The pregnancy was difficult at times, the heat of a Texas summer making Hannah sick and exhausted, but she refused to slow down more than necessary. There was work to be done, and she was determined to pull her weight. Austin fussed over her constantly, which she found both endearing and mildly irritating, but she understood the fear behind it. They had both lost so much in their lives. The thought of losing each other, or this baby, was unbearable. In October, Cyrus Matson made his proposal official. He wanted to retire in a few years, move to town, maybe do some traveling while he still could. He offered to sell Austin a half share in the ranch, with the understanding that Austin would buy him out completely over time. The terms were generous, more generous than Austin had any right to expect, but Cyrus was clear in his reasoning. "I have got no children of my own," he said. "No family to speak of. This ranch is my legacy, and I want it to go to someone who will care for it, who will build on what I started. That is you, Austin. You and Hannah." It took nearly every penny they had saved, plus a loan from the bank that made Hannah nervous, but they signed the papers in November, becoming part owners of the Matson Ranch. The weight of the responsibility was enormous, but so was the opportunity. "We are ranchers now," Austin said that night, staring at the contract as though he could not quite believe it was real. "We are," Hannah agreed, her hand resting on her swollen belly. "And soon we will be parents too." The baby came in late February, after a labor that lasted 18 hours and left Hannah exhausted, and Austin a nervous wreck. But when the midwife, a capable woman named Sarah Wills who lived in San Angelo and had delivered half the babies in the county, placed the squalling infant in Hannah's arms, all the pain and fear evaporated. "A boy," Sarah announced with satisfaction. "Healthy and strong, just like his parents." They named him James William McCabe, after Austin's father and Hannah's, and he was perfect in every way. Austin held his son with such tenderness, such awe, that Hannah fell in love with him all over again. This man who had been alone in the world, who had saved her when she was at her lowest, who had built a life with her from nothing, was now a father, and the joy on his face was something she would remember always. The first year of James's life was a blur of sleepless nights and endless work, of learning to balance the demands of a baby with the demands of the ranch. Hannah learned to nurse while reviewing accounts, to rock James to sleep while planning the next day's tasks. Austin learned to change diapers and soothe a fussy infant and still somehow get his work done. They learned together, made mistakes together, figured it out as they went. Cyrus was a doting grandfather in all but blood, visiting often to check on his ranch and his adopted family. He taught James to ride before the boy could even walk properly, setting him on a gentle mare and leading them around the yard while James squealed with delight. "This one is going to be a rancher," Cyrus pronounced. "Got the feel for it already." When James was 2, Hannah found out she was pregnant again, and this time the joy was mixed with trepidation. They had barely managed with one child in the ranch. How would they handle 2? But they did handle it, as they handled everything else together. Their daughter, Rose Ellen, was born in October of 1887, during a rainstorm that broke a long drought and seemed like a good omen. She was smaller than James had been, with Hannah's dark hair and Austin's amber eyes, and from the moment she arrived, she had her father wrapped around her tiny finger. "I am in trouble," Austin said, holding Rose while she slept against his chest. "I will never be able to tell this one no." "Then I will be the disciplinarian," Hannah said, laughing. "You can be the soft one." But in truth, they both were soft when it came to their children, and stern when necessary, trying to raise them with love and discipline in equal measure. James grew into a bright, energetic boy who followed his father everywhere, pestering him with questions, desperate to learn everything about ranching. Rose was quieter, more thoughtful, but with a stubborn streak that reminded Hannah of herself. In 1889, Cyrus Matson died peacefully in his sleep at the age of 68. He left everything to Austin and Hannah, his entire share of the ranch, with a letter thanking them for giving an old man the family he had never had. Austin read the letter at the funeral and broke down crying, and Hannah held him while he grieved for the man who had been more than a boss, more than a friend, who had been the father Austin had lost so many years before. The weight of running the entire ranch fell on their shoulders now, but they had learned so much in the years since they married, had built relationships with the other ranchers in the area, with the bankers and cattle buyers, with everyone who mattered. The Matson Ranch, now officially the McCabe Ranch, thrived under their management. They bought more land, hired more men, built a proper house to replace the line shack they had outgrown. The new house was not grand by any standards, but it was solid and comfortable, with 3 bedrooms and a real kitchen and a porch that wrapped around 2 sides. Hannah furnished it slowly, carefully, buying only what they needed, always conscious of the debts they still carried, the constant financial pressure of ranching. But it was theirs, every board and nail, built with their own money and sweat. James started school in San Angelo when he was 6, riding into town each day with one of the ranch hands who lived near the schoolhouse. Rose would follow 2 years later, but for now, she was Hannah's shadow, following her mother around the house and garden, learning to cook and sew and all the things a young lady should know, but also learning to ride and rope and handle herself on a ranch, because that was the life they led. In 1892, Hannah lost a baby in the 4th month of pregnancy, and the grief nearly broke her. Austin held her through the worst of it, his own sorrow evident but controlled because one of them needed to be strong. When Hannah finally emerged from the dark period, she found that Rose, now 5, had picked wildflowers and filled every room in the house with them, trying in her child's way to bring color back into her mother's life. "Did you like the flowers, Mama?" Rose asked anxiously. "I loved them, sweetheart," Hannah said, pulling her daughter close. "Thank you." Life went on because it had to, and in time the sharp edge of grief dulled to a sad memory. Hannah threw herself back into the work of the ranch, into raising her children, into building the life she and Austin had started that frozen night so many years ago. She was 30 now, Austin 35, and sometimes she looked at him and marveled that they had made it this far, had built so much from so little. In 1894, a drought hit Texas hard, and the McCabe Ranch suffered along with everyone else. Cattle died, water sources dried up, and the bank started making noises about their remaining loans. It was a desperate time, and Hannah watched the worry lines deepen on Austin's face, saw him age before her eyes with the stress of it all. "We will get through this," she told him one night as they lay in bed, both too worried to sleep. "We have gotten through everything else." "I am not sure we can this time," Austin admitted, the first time he had voiced such doubt. "If this drought does not break soon, we are going to lose everything." "Then we lose it," Hannah said firmly. "But we will still have each other and our children, and that is what matters most." Austin turned to look at her, his eyes shining in the moonlight coming through the window. "How are you always so strong?" "Because I learned from the best," Hannah said. "You saved me, Austin. You taught me that even when everything seems impossible, you keep going. So that is what we will do. We will keep going." The drought broke in September, a week of steady rain that soaked into the parched earth and refilled the water holes and brought the grass back to life. It was not a perfect recovery. They had lost nearly a third of their herd, but it was enough. They survived, limping but alive, and slowly began to rebuild. The turn of the century came, and with it a new era for the McCabe Ranch. James was 15 now, tall and strong, already doing a man's work around the ranch. Rose was 12, beautiful and smart, talking about becoming a teacher someday. Hannah was 36, Austin 41, and they had been married for 15 years, weathered every storm together, built something lasting and real. In 1902, James met a girl in San Angelo, the daughter of a shopkeeper, and fell head over heels in love with a speed that made Hannah laugh and Austin shake his head. But Sarah Carter was a sweet girl, sensible and kind, and they gave James their blessing when he asked to court her properly. Rose, meanwhile, had indeed become determined to be a teacher, studying hard, devouring every book she could get her hands on. She was accepted to the normal school in Fort Worth, and when the time came for her to leave, Hannah cried despite her pride in her daughter's accomplishment. "I will be back," Rose promised. "This is my home, Mama. I just want to learn and bring that learning back here." In 1905, James married Sarah in a ceremony at the same church where Hannah and Austin had married 20 years before. Hannah stood beside Austin, watching their son pledge his life to the woman he loved, and felt the circle of life completing itself. They were not young anymore, she and Austin, but they had lived fully, loved deeply, built something that would outlast them. James and Sarah settled on the ranch, building their own house a mile from the main house, and soon there were grandchildren. First came William in 1906, then twin girls, Emma and Grace, in 1908. Hannah watched Austin with his grandchildren and saw the same wonder he had shown with James and Rose, that same capacity for love that had drawn her to him all those years ago. Rose came home from Fort Worth in 1907 with her teaching certificate and opened a small school on the ranch for the children of the ranch hands. She was 21, beautiful and accomplished, and turned down several proposals because she said she was not ready to settle down yet. "Let her find her own way," Austin advised when Hannah worried about Rose ending up alone. "She is like you, strong and independent. She will know when the right man comes along." The right man came along in 1909, a new doctor in San Angelo named Thomas Wright, who was treating one of the ranch hands for a broken leg and met Rose when she came to check on the man. Thomas was 30, educated back east but drawn to the frontier, and he and Rose were married within 6 months. "You were right," Hannah told Austin after Rose's wedding. "She knew when she found the right one." "Just like you did," Austin said, pulling her close. In 1910, Hannah and Austin celebrated their 25th wedding anniversary, surrounded by their children and grandchildren, by the ranch hands who had become like family, by the life they had built together. They stood on the porch of their house, looking out over the land that was theirs, hard-won and deeply loved, and Hannah thought back to that frozen night in 1884 when she had thought her life was over. "You ever think about that night I found you?" Austin asked, as if reading her mind. "Often," Hannah admitted. "I think about how close I came to dying, and then I think about how you appeared like a miracle and saved me." "Best thing I ever did," Austin said. "For me too," Hannah said. "You warmed my frozen tears that night, Austin McCabe, and you have kept your promise. You have given me smiles, so many smiles, every day since. And I will keep giving them to you," Austin said, kissing her softly, "for all the days we have left." The years that followed were gentler than the early ones had been, though still filled with work and challenge. The ranch continued to thrive under James's increasingly capable management, with Austin stepping back bit by bit, accepting his role as the elder statesman, the one who advised but no longer made every decision. Hannah too found herself with more time, filling it with her grandchildren, with helping Rose at the school, with the community work she had never had time for before. In 1915, Rose and Thomas had their first child, a boy they named Austin after his grandfather, and when Austin held his namesake, Hannah saw tears in his eyes. "I never thought I would have any of this," he said quietly. "A family, a legacy, people who will carry on after I am gone. It is more than I ever dreamed." "You deserve it all," Hannah said. "Every bit of it. The First World War touched them even in far-off Texas, and when America entered the fight in 1917, James tried to enlist despite being 32 and having a family to support. It was Austin who talked him out of it, reminding him that the ranch needed him, that his children needed him, that there were other ways to serve than going overseas. Instead, they contributed to the war effort by raising extra beef, by buying Liberty bonds, by supporting the families in the area who did send their sons to fight. When the war ended, they joined in the celebrations with relief and gratitude that their family had been spared the worst of it. The 1920s brought prosperity and change. Automobiles became more common, and Austin finally broke down and bought one in 1922, though he never fully trusted it the way he trusted a good horse. The ranch modernized with better equipment, new breeding techniques, all the innovations that came with the new century. But at its heart, it remained what it had always been, a family ranch built on hard work and love and the determination to keep going no matter what. In 1925, Hannah and Austin celebrated their 40th wedding anniversary. They were both in their 60s now, slowed by age but still strong, still sharp, still deeply in love. The party was enormous, with people coming from all over Texas to celebrate, and when Austin stood to make a toast, his voice was strong and clear. 40 years ago, I found this woman freezing to death in the dark, he began, looking at Hannah with such love it made her eyes sting. I had no idea then that she would become my entire world, but that is what happened. Hannah, you have been my partner, my love, my reason for everything. You made me better than I ever could have been alone. Here is to 40 more years. Everyone cheered and drank, and Hannah kissed her husband and thought about the improbability of their story, how a moment of frozen desperation had led to a lifetime of warmth and joy. They did not get 40 more years. In 1929, Austin had a heart attack while out riding the range. He made it back to the house, and Hannah was with him at the end, holding his hand while their children and grandchildren gathered around. I love you, were his last words. From that first night until now, always you. Always, Hannah whispered back, and then he was gone. The grief was enormous, overwhelming, a physical weight that pressed on Hannah's chest and made breathing difficult. She had known Austin for 45 years, been married to him for 45 years, built an entire life with him. Without him, the world felt wrong, empty in a way it had not been even during her darkest moments before they met. But she had her children, her grandchildren, the ranch that was his legacy as much as hers. She had the life they had built together, proof that they had mattered, that their love had created something lasting. So Hannah kept going, because that was what Austin had taught her to do all those years ago, because stopping was not an option. She lived for another 15 years, dying peacefully in her sleep in 1944 at the age of 80. Her family buried her next to Austin on a hill overlooking the ranch, the same spot where they used to sit together and watch the sunset. On the shared headstone, James had inscribed, Austin and Hannah McCabe, together they built a legacy of love, and it was true. The ranch continued through the generations, through James and his children, through Rose and her children, spreading out across Texas, carrying the names and values and love of the two people who had started it all on a frozen night in 1884, when a cowboy found a woman crying in the dark, warmed her frozen tears, and promised her smiles tomorrow. He had kept that promise every single day, and the smiles continued long after they were both gone, carried on in the faces of their descendants, in the life they had built from nothing, in the enduring power of a love that had defied every expectation and created something beautiful and lasting. The McCabe Ranch still stands today, a testament to what two people can build when they refuse to give up, when they choose love even when it seems improbable, when they keep their promises no matter how hard the world tries to break them. And on winter nights, when the wind howls across the Texas plains, some say you can still hear the echo of that long-ago moment when a desperate woman's tears froze on her cheeks and a good man stopped to help, changing both their lives forever. The story of Austin and Hannah McCabe became legend in San Angelo and the surrounding country, the kind of tale people told their children and grandchildren as an example of true love, of perseverance, of the best qualities of the frontier spirit. Young couples would visit their graves on the hill, hoping some of that love would bless their own marriages. The house they built still stood 100 years later, carefully maintained by the family, a museum of sorts to the life they had lived. In the modern era, their great-great-grandchildren would gather at that house for holidays and special occasions, and someone would always tell the story again. About how Hannah had lost everything and nearly died in the cold. About how Austin had found her and saved her and fallen in love with her. About how they had built the ranch from nothing through determination and devotion. About how their love had sustained them through drought and loss, through hard times and good, until death finally parted them after 45 years together. And every time the story was told, it ended the same way, with the same truth that Hannah herself had recognized on their 25th anniversary. Austin McCabe had warmed her frozen tears that night in 1884, had promised her smiles tomorrow, and he had kept that promise faithfully until his last breath. The tears of that desperate night had transformed into tears of joy, of laughter, of the full and complex emotions of a life well lived with the person you loved most in the world. It was a promise kept, a love honored, a legacy secured. And in a world that often seemed harsh and uncertain, that meant everything.